Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is 11:02 on a Friday, TGIF. Hope everyone has some fun plans for this weekend. I'm going to the movies tonight, which I'm super excited. I'm gonna go with my girlfriend Heather to go see The Long Walk, which is a movie I know very little about. I saw a trailer for it about a month or two ago when I went to the theater to see a really great movie that came out called Weapons, which is really great. Uh, Really awesome horror movie. And I saw the trailer for The Long Walk, and I don't know anything about it. The trailer looked really cool and really intriguing. Uh, and I don't really know what the movie's about. I think it's based on a Stephen King story. I could be wrong. Um, and the vibe that I got from the trailer was it could be like a post-apocalyptic uh, scenario or a zombie scenario or like a Lord of the Flies kind of scenario. I'm not really sure, but it looked really good. And going into it totally cold, I heard little bits and pieces of some kind of reviews saying that this film was really good, like a horror film, but it really struck like a deep chord. So, and I heard that the book is supposed to be really awesome, like really intense. So yeah, I'm excited. And but today's show, I wanted to talk about a movie. Speaking of Stephen King, I just watched two Stephen King adaptations, and I'm gonna do a show on another one called Christine, uh, the one of the great John Carpenter films. I hadn't seen that movie in years, and I just watched that the other night. And then last night, I'm gonna do a show on Christine pretty soon because that's like such a classic. Huge, huge John Carpenter fan. But I watched a movie last night that I was like, man, I don't think I've done a show on this, and this is like ridiculous. And that is Brian De Palma's Carrie, 1976. It's uh, it's a freaking classic. I had not seen this film in a very long time. I was kind of taken aback by that. Uh, and I'm like, wait, did I review this movie? And I bought this, and I don't think I have, but if I did, that's okay, I guess. But I was going through some of my movies the other night, and I came across Carrie. I was just like, wait, shit, I don't know if I've done a show on this. And I bought this really great Blu-ray edition of this classic film a couple of years ago. I think I got it at Goodwill in Rockland. I got it really cheap, and I watched this last night, and man, what a movie this is! I'm a massive Brian De Palma fan. I mean, he's one of my favorite directors. He was really greatly influenced by Hitchcock, and he's master of suspense. Dressed to Kill, The Fury, Body Double. I mean, so many great films. And he worked in kind of the low budget, gritty kind of exploitation realm. He did so many great films in the '70s and the '80s, and this is one of his best. Of course, Scarface, uh, and an endless amount of other films. But I own quite a few of his movies. He's one of my favorite directors, and I watched this last night. And it's been a super long time since I've seen this from '76. And again, this movie is the reason why the '70s, why that's my favorite decade. There's a certain gritty quality to it, to the storytelling, to the characters, to the characterization. There is no CGI, of course. Everything is practical effects. Everything's in camera. Sissy Spacek, this is one of her first roles. Just incredible. Such a great story. And, it's a very popular story. It's a very popular movie, but I realized I don't think I have covered it. And it's been so long since I've watched it. But, Brian De Palma being one of my favorite directors, this is definitely one of his best movies. And I think there's been some really great, fantastic adaptations of King stories, Stephen King stories, and there has been quite a few that are not very good. Pet Cemetery is one of my favorites. I love that. I bought that on Blu-ray a couple of years ago. I did do a review for that. The original Pet Cemetery is just astounding. The remake is just a big pile of shit. But the original is such a classic movie, such a terrifying movie. My favorite adaptation, even though it has nothing to do with the book, is Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, of course, superior to the book in every way. But this is a great adaptation. It, of course, is a classic, and Christine was really, really great. The Dead Zone is another one with Christopher Walken, directed by David Cronenberg. I did a show on that a while ago. I got that on Blu-ray. But man, this is such a great film. Um, and again, one of the things that I've said, you know, in the past, like there's been a lot of fantastic horror films that have come out. Um, Movies like The Substance, Long Legs, and In a Violent Nature. So I think it's great and it's really inspiring when I see newer horror films that I feel are keeping that fire burning, and there's still really good films coming out in the genre, and that are pushing the genre forward. But typically, there's also so many movies that have come out that I don't really like, and one of the biggest things around it, like movies like Heart Eyes, which was a real recent slasher film, and then One Hell of a Summer was another really recent one. And one of the problems that I have with a lot of the newer kind of slasher films, because the slasher genre is my favorite, and granted, Carrie is not a slasher film, but it's a pure horror film, is a lot of the newer films, like the casting, or the characters, especially slasher films, where stories are centered on either very young people or teenagers. It's typically now everybody in the cast for like a newer film, everybody looks too pretty and too perfect. They don't look like teenagers to me. They all look like supermodels or models. But there's something about the 70s, like where teenagers they look like regular kids. They look like teenagers, they warts and all. And that's the thing. Another aspect of why I love 70s films is that they're more raw. Um, they kind of go to darker places. They're not. I think Carrie is one of those movies that probably couldn't really be made today because of some of the kind of the things this movie dives into as far as how you know teenagers and people are just kind of terrible to each other. And there's certain things that would not fly today. I think that this movie does, that wouldn't be considered politically correct. But the '70s was like, you know, I kind of feel like, to a degree, like the '70s was like, I almost think of it as like outlaw cinema. Like it was no holds barred. Studios, directors, especially in the lower budget horror realm, exploitation realm, especially, they had this like take no prisoners attitude, and they weren't, there was no shackles to what they, to their vision, and they were taking chances, pushing the boundaries. And again, that does still happen. I mean, one of the movies that really pushed the boundaries is The Substance with Demi Moore, an extraordinary film that came out last year. That movie definitely pushes the envelope. But in the '70s, that was how movies were made. There were just so many movies that were pushing those boundaries, and they weren't worried about offending people per se. But Carrie is such an incredible film. This is a really beautiful edition, and I think I got this at Goodwill in Rockland a couple of years ago. But an extraordinary film, one of the best Brian De Palma movies. Really great cast. And it's to me, it really is. It's like the epitome of why what makes the '70s the best decade for me. Brilliant cast all around. Sissy Spacek, of course, in one of her most iconic roles, probably the role she's known most for. Piper Laurie, Amy Irving, yeah, just such a great cast. And there's so many great shots in this movie. Like watching Carrie, there's two sequences in particular in this movie where there's a scene of where this group of teenagers, they're walking down this this street, this side street, and there's this really cool like kind of painted mural on the back on this wall of this building, and there's this long kind of panning shot of these kids walking, and you're seeing all of this cool artwork behind these kids, and then you're seeing them kind of interact, and it's so beautifully shot. And then there's the infamous scene of the third act where the prom scene in Carrie where literally all hell breaks loose. And the way we are, as viewers, the way we're introduced to that whole sequence is just absolutely amazing. Like the use of the camera work, the cinematography, the way the placement of the camera and the angles that are used is, watching this movie, just even with this sequence alone, it's like a master class on how to shoot something perfectly. The way we're kind of introduced to the scene. I mean, the set design is incredible. The lighting is just incredible, and the grittiness of this movie, and it really, pushes those boundaries. Like '70s films did. And especially in the horror exploitation world, and the way we're introduced to the sequence is absolutely brilliant. It's so powerfully shot that it feels like the cinematography and the camera work. It's so powerful that it's acting like it's another character in the movie. And there's this panning shot of where we we see the we see this room kind of open up, and it's just brilliant. And it's been quite a while since I've seen Carrie, and I was going through my movies the other day, and I was like, wait, I don't think I've done a show on this, and I definitely have not seen this movie in a long time, and I think I maybe watched it once since I bought it, but I might not have. But man, what definitely one of the best Brian De Palma films of all time. And there is a remake. I have not seen it, and sometimes remakes are pretty hit or miss. There are good examples. There's probably more bad remakes, if you will, that have come out. Over the years, but there's been some exceptions. I think Fede Alvarez's adaptation of Evil Dead was fantastic, and there's been a couple other films that I think are pretty good, but for the most part, you just want to see the original again, and this is a masterpiece. I think it's one of the best adaptations of a Stephen King story ever made. And it's between watching this and Christine, I want to dive into exploring some of his books again. But man, what an astounding movie! And there's two discs on here. There's a DVD version of it, and then there's a Blu-ray version. I watched the Blu-ray version of it. There's no special features on the Blu-ray, but I believe that there's a bunch of special features on the DVD, so I'm going to check that out. But Brian De Palma, one of my favorite directors. I have a few of his films. I have, I need to get more of his films, but Body Double, which is amazing. That's one of my favorite films. I consider that movie more of a slasher, psychosexual kind of exploitation movie. Brian De Palma in the '70s was, again, I feel like he was really greatly, very much influenced by Hitchcock, and I feel like he was a master storyteller, but a master of suspense. And I own Body Double, of course, Carrie. I have Dress to Kill on VHS. I need to get most of his films. I need to do a serious upgrade of buying his films on Blu-ray. I mean, one of my favorite directors of all time. I've seen lots of interviews with Quentin Tarantino over the years, and he always talks about how what a massive influence he is and how much he regards him as a director. There was a documentary that came out a few years ago about Brian De Palma, which I haven't seen. I heard it's really, really good, like a retrospective thing of where he's actually being interviewed. But man, what a movie! And again, another reason why the '70s for me was the best decade ever. There's just a certain gritty realism. There's I think studios, even big studios, big Hollywood studios, but then especially in the low budget exploitation world, kind of across the board. But I think filmmakers were willing to take a chance and a risk, and go to places that they weren't worried about offending people. And I think there's a lot of things in this movie that I feel would probably offend people nowadays if this was made the way it was shot today. If this was made now with the aesthetics that are used, but it really captures the trauma and the how how horrible it can be for teenagers growing up and going to high school. It's a trial by fire experience. And the one of the things that I forgot how probably the most terrifying aspect of this movie is Carrie's mother. She is this kind of crazed Christian fundamentalist who is just completely insane, and her character is just amazing. And she is definitely the most frightening character in this movie. And of course, the story is about Carrie, who is a teenager who is picked on endlessly and ridiculed and made fun of. And you're given this kind of indication early on that she might have these kind of telekinesis powers, or has these supernatural powers. And when things are really set off for her, she will more or less unleash her fury, and she does by the third act. And it's just so awesome. But the tension of this movie, I was thinking about, kind of thinking it in terms of like if you take a balloon, and it's all about the level of suspense that De Palma was able to achieve with this movie. But it's like if you take a balloon and you fill it with air, and then you just gradually put more and more air in this balloon over a small period of time to where it's going to pop. Like, that's how I feel the suspense is in this movie. By the second and third act, going to the stunning kind of climax of this movie, like it just the tension is just explosive, and great characters. You really get the sense of like just the horrible life that she is a part of, Carrie. From her psychotic mother to the psychotic kids in her high school, and how they're just awful. And it's kind of a revenge story too, and to some degree. But man, an amazing movie. And it's been a hot minute since I've seen this movie, but it's one of Brian De Palma's best movies. And I think with Sissy Spacek being such an amazing actress, she's probably most well known for this movie. It's probably her most iconic role, but she's been in so many great films over the years. Just an amazing actress. So yeah, I can't recommend this movie enough. It's 1976. It's why I love the '70s. It's such a masterpiece, and one of the greatest adaptations of a Stephen King story, and one of the best De Palma movies out there. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.